Michael sat in his car outside the neighborhood gym, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. It wasn't his workout routine that had him here tonight. No, he had already gone through Lisa's routine GPS logs for the past week, and this gym was her newest obsession. Or so she claimed. Lisa had been acting strangely for months. She was glued to her phone, her laughter too forced whenever he asked who she was texting. She claimed she was getting fit and focused on self-care. But Michael wasn't buying it anymore. Not after he had seen the late-night text pop up on her phone weeks ago. "Can't wait to see you again tomorrow." At the time, he hadn't said anything. He didn't want to believe his wife, the woman he had loved and trusted for 8 years, could be lying to him. But tonight, as he sat in his car watching the entrance of the gym, he felt his doubts harden into something sharper, something he couldn't ignore. As the minutes ticked by, Michael's patience was rewarded. He saw Lisa step out of the gym doors, her hair tied back, looking slightly disheveled, but glowing in a way that had nothing to do with exercise. She wasn't alone. Walking closely beside her, with a hand resting lightly on her back, was a man Michael didn't recognize. Younger, fit, and exuding the kind of charm that grated on Michael's nerves. Lisa looked up at the man, laughing at something he said, her smile brighter than it had been at home in months. Michael's chest tightened, but he forced himself to stay calm. This wasn't the time for confrontation. He needed proof, irrefutable proof that couldn't be dismissed as paranoia or a misunderstanding. Michael grabbed his phone and snapped a few pictures as Lisa and the man got into separate cars. He tailed Lisa discreetly as she drove home, parking 2 streets away from their house to avoid raising suspicion. She walked in, her demeanor casual, as though she hadn't just spent the evening wrapped in another man's attention. Later that night, as Lisa showered, Michael unlocked her phone. It had taken weeks to figure out her new passcode, but persistence had paid off. He scrolled through her messages and found what he had feared: texts filled with flirtation, innuendos, and plans to meet again. His jaw clenched as he read the words, his heart pounding. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't his imagination. His wife was having an affair, and she was getting bolder about it. Michael locked the phone and placed it back where he found it, his expression unreadable. The betrayal burned, but he wouldn't let it break him. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed, staring at Lisa's shadow behind the shower curtain. She thought she had him fooled. She thought her affair was perfect, her lies seamless, but Michael wasn't going to confront her with anger or accusations. No, he had a better idea. If Lisa thought she was in control, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. The next morning, Michael woke up early, determined to begin laying the groundwork for his plan. Lisa remained blissfully unaware, humming to herself in the kitchen as she prepared her usual green smoothie. "Morning," she said cheerfully, placing a glass in front of him. "Big day at work?" Michael forced a smile. "Yeah, some meetings. You?" Lisa shrugged, her response casual. "Just the usual, gym after work." Michael sipped his smoothie, the image of her smiling at the younger man outside the gym flashing in his mind. "You're really committed to this gym thing, huh?" Lisa hesitated for a fraction of a second before smiling again. "Yeah, it's great for stress. You should try it sometime." Michael nodded, masking the churn of emotions in his chest. "Maybe I will." After Lisa left for work, Michael began making calls. He reached out to an old friend, Sam, who worked as a private investigator. Sam had seen it all: cheating spouses, hidden affairs, and messy divorces. "This isn't just about knowing," Michael explained. "I need concrete proof. Pictures, messages, anything that leaves no room for doubt." Sam agreed, and by the afternoon, the plan was set in motion. Lisa's car would be tracked, and Sam would follow her movements for the next few days. Michael didn't want to miss anything. In the meantime, Michael prepared himself emotionally. He spent hours reviewing everything he already knew: piecing together a timeline of her deception. The more he uncovered, the clearer it became that Lisa had been lying for months. 3 days later, Sam called with an update. "She's definitely meeting this guy," Sam said. "Ryan. They've been to a cafe, the gym, and, most recently, a hotel." Michael's heart sank, but he forced himself to focus. "You have pictures?" "Everything," Sam confirmed. "Time-stamped, high quality, undeniable." Michael thanked him, his voice calm despite the storm inside. He ended the call and sat in silence for a moment, staring at the folder of evidence Sam had sent to his email. The photos were damning. Lisa and Ryan holding hands at the cafe, exchanging lingering glances, and disappearing into a hotel room. That evening, Michael returned home and found Lisa on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled as though nothing was amiss. "How was your day?" she asked. "Busy," Michael replied evenly. He sat beside her, glancing at her phone. "You?" "Same old," she said, quickly locking her screen. Michael leaned back, his expression unreadable. "We should have a dinner party this weekend," he said suddenly. Lisa blinked, surprised. "A dinner party? Why?" "Why not?" Michael said with a shrug. "We haven't had friends over in a while. It'll be fun." Lisa hesitated, then smiled. "Okay, sure. I'll start planning." Michael smiled back, but his mind was already racing ahead. He knew exactly how the night would play out, and Lisa had no idea what was coming. The weekend arrived, and the house was buzzing with activity as Lisa prepared for the dinner party. She was in her element, setting the table with the best china and arranging flowers in a crystal vase. To anyone watching, she seemed like the perfect wife hosting a perfect evening. Michael observed her silently, noting the extra effort she was putting in. He wondered if she was trying to mask her guilt or simply play the role she thought he expected. Either way, it didn't matter. Tonight wasn't about the party. It was about the truth. By 7 p.m., the guests began arriving. Lisa greeted them with her usual charm, while Michael stayed in the background, keeping a watchful eye. Among the guests were their close friends, neighbors, and even a few of Lisa's colleagues. The atmosphere was lively, with laughter and conversations filling the room. Michael bided his time, waiting for the perfect moment. He wanted Lisa to feel comfortable, to believe everything was normal. As dinner was served, Lisa raised a toast. "To friends, family, and love," she said with a bright smile, clinking her glass with Michael's. Michael smiled back, though his grip on the glass tightened. He could feel the weight of the USB drive in his pocket, where it rested with all the evidence he had gathered. After dinner, as the guests moved to the living room for drinks, Michael excused himself briefly. He went to the entertainment console where the TV and sound system were set up. With steady hands, he inserted the USB drive into the connected laptop and queued up the folder labeled Truth. Returning to the living room, Michael stood by the fireplace, his expression calm but serious. "Can I have everyone's attention for a moment?" he said, his voice cutting through the chatter. The room quieted, and all eyes turned to him. Lisa looked puzzled but smiled, clearly curious about what he was up to. Michael picked up the remote and turned on the TV. "I wanted to share something with all of you tonight," he said, his voice steady. The screen lit up, displaying a series of photos. At first, they seemed harmless. Lisa and Ryan sitting at a cafe chatting. But as the slideshow progressed, the images became damning. Lisa and Ryan holding hands, sharing intimate moments, and finally entering a hotel room together. The room fell into stunned silence. Lisa's smile froze, her face draining of color as she stared at the screen. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd, the weight of the revelation sinking in. "Michael," Lisa began, her voice barely a whisper. Michael raised a hand, silencing her. "Let's not interrupt," he said coldly. "We wouldn't want to miss anything." The slideshow continued, each image more incriminating than the last. The guests exchanged shocked glances, their expressions a mix of disbelief and pity. Lisa tried to speak again, but Michael's gaze stopped her in her tracks. "You wanted to play games, Lisa," he said, his tone calm but cutting. "So, here we are. Welcome to the end of your little charade." Lisa looked around desperately, but there was no escape. The perfect life she had tried so hard to project was crumbling before her eyes, and Michael was holding the wrecking ball. Lisa's world shattered as the slideshow came to an end. The final image lingered on the screen, a time-stamped photo of her and Ryan embracing outside the hotel. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the faint clinking of a glass someone nervously set down. Michael stepped forward, holding the remote in one hand, his expression calm yet commanding. He looked at Lisa, whose face was now streaked with tears. "Anything you'd like to say, Lisa?" he asked, his tone deceptively calm. Lisa stammered, her voice cracking. "Michael, I didn't mean for this to happen. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" Michael interrupted, his voice sharp. "A mistake is spilling coffee on the carpet. What you did was a series of choices. Choices to betray me, lie to me, and humiliate me." The guests shifted uncomfortably, the weight of the confrontation making it hard to breathe. Lisa looked around the room, searching for an ally, but all she found were judging eyes. Ryan, who had quietly slipped into the party earlier at Lisa's invitation, stood near the doorway, his face pale. Michael's gaze snapped to him. "And you," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "The brave man sneaking around behind my back. Care to explain yourself?" Ryan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked like a deer caught in headlights, unable to move or defend himself. Michael took a step closer, his presence towering. "What's the matter? No clever lines? No excuses?" He let the silence hang for a moment before turning back to the crowd. "I invited you all here tonight because I wanted the truth to come out," Michael said, addressing the guests. "For months, I've been living with a woman I thought I knew, a woman who promised to love and honor me. Instead, she's been sneaking around with this clown," he gestured toward Ryan, "thinking I wouldn't notice." Lisa sobbed quietly, but Michael didn't waver. She thought her affair was perfect, that she had all the answers. But here's the thing about lies. They always unravel eventually. One of Lisa's close friends, Emily, finally broke the silence. "Lisa, is this true?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief and disappointment. Lisa couldn't meet her gaze. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Michael said, his voice firm. "The pictures say it all. And so do the texts and the GPS logs. I've got everything, months of evidence that prove exactly who you are." The room erupted into hushed murmurs as Michael pulled out a folder from the coffee table. "Here," he said, handing it to Lisa. "Take a good look. This is your legacy." Lisa flipped through the pages, her hands trembling. Each photo, each text thread was like a dagger cutting through whatever denial she had left. She looked up at Michael, her voice barely audible. "Please, don't do this." Michael leaned in, his eyes cold. "You did this to yourself." The tension in the room was unbearable. Ryan muttered something under his breath and made a hasty exit, pushing past the stunned guests. Lisa stood frozen, unable to follow him, knowing that leaving would only make things worse. Michael turned to the guests one last time. "I'm sorry to ruin your evening," he said, his voice steady. "But I think you all deserve to know the truth. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think the party's over." He walked out of the room, leaving Lisa standing alone in front of their friends, her perfect image shattered. The aftermath of the dinner party lingered like a storm cloud over Lisa's life. Word spread quickly through their social circle, and by the next day, Nearly everyone knew the details. Michael's calm yet calculated exposure had left Lisa with no room to hide. At home, the silence was suffocating. Lisa sat on the couch, staring blankly at the folder Michael had handed her. Each piece of evidence felt like a brick crushing her chest. She had tried to craft the perfect facade, but now everything was crumbling, and she had no one to blame but herself. Michael, on the other hand, moved with a quiet confidence. He spent the next few days consulting with his lawyer, ensuring his financial assets were protected. The divorce papers were drafted quickly, and he had already outlined his terms. Lisa would leave with nothing more than her personal belongings. One evening, Lisa tried to speak to him, her voice trembling. "Michael, can we talk, please?" Michael didn't even look up from the documents he was reviewing. "Talk about what?" he asked, his tone cold. "About how you lied to my face for months, or about how you threw away everything we built for some cheap thrill?" Tears welled up in Lisa's eyes, but Michael didn't soften. "You don't get to play the victim here," he continued. "You made your choices. Now you live with the consequences." Lisa tried to salvage her reputation, reaching out to friends to explain her side of the story. But her calls went unanswered, and her messages were ignored. Even her closest friends, who had once supported her through everything, now kept their distance. At work, the situation wasn't much better. The humiliation from the party followed her like a shadow, and whispers circulated among her colleagues. Lisa felt the walls closing in, her carefully constructed life collapsing piece by piece. Michael, meanwhile, began to reclaim his life. He removed all traces of Lisa from the house, her photos, her belongings, even the decorative touches she had insisted on. The space felt lighter, freer, as if a weight had been lifted. He threw himself into work, earning praise for his focus and determination. His colleagues noticed the change in him. He seemed sharper, more driven, and unshakable. But Michael didn't stop there. He started going to the gym, not to chase revenge, but to rebuild himself. Each workout was a step towards strength, both physical and emotional. He refused to let Lisa's betrayal define him. One day, as Michael was leaving the gym, he noticed Lisa waiting in the parking lot. Her face was pale, her once confident demeanor replaced by desperation. "Michael," she said, her voice trembling, "please, can we just talk?" Michael looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said, "There's nothing left to talk about, Lisa. You made your choices and I've made mine." Lisa reached for his arm, but he stepped back. "You're not the person I thought you were," he said, his voice calm but firm. "And I'm not going to let you drag me down anymore." With that, he walked away, leaving her standing alone in the parking lot. Weeks turned into months, and Michael's life took on a renewed sense of purpose. He had transformed his pain into motivation, focusing on bettering himself in every way. He started running every morning, his feet pounding the pavement as he left the weight of the past behind him. The house, once a shared space full of tension, was now entirely his. He redecorated it to reflect his own style, sleek, minimalist, and full of light. The walls, once adorned with photos of him and Lisa, were now bare, waiting for new memories to be made. Michael's friends rallied around him, inviting him out more often and reminding him that life wasn't over. At first, he hesitated, unsure if he was ready to move on. But eventually, he accepted their invitations, finding joy in reconnecting with the people who truly cared about him. Meanwhile, Lisa's world continued to crumble. She had moved into a modest apartment on the outskirts of town, far from the life of comfort she had grown accustomed to. The few friends who still spoke to her did so out of pity, their conversations laced with awkward silences. Ryan, the man she had risked everything for, had vanished without a trace. He had ghosted her after the dinner party, unwilling to deal with the fallout of their exposed affair. Lisa was left to pick up the pieces alone, grappling with the full weight of her choices. One evening, as Michael sat on his porch with a glass of wine, his phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, but something told him who it was. He hesitated for a moment before answering. "Michael, it's me." Lisa's voice came through, hesitant and shaky. "What do you want, Lisa?" Michael asked, his tone neutral. I wanted to apologize," she said. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I needed to say I'm sorry. For everything." Michael listened in silence, letting her words hang in the air. Finally, he said, "Lisa, I've moved on. I suggest you do the same." Her voice broke as she tried to respond. I just wish I could take it all back." "You can't," Michael said firmly, "and that's something you'll have to live with." He hung up, feeling a strange sense of closure. He didn't need her apology to heal. He had already done that on his own. Later that night, as Michael reflected on the call, he realized how far he had come. Lisa's betrayal had once consumed him, but now it felt like a distant memory, a lesson learned. He was no longer the man she had left behind. He was stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the future. Life had a way of rewarding resilience, and for Michael, that reward came in the form of unexpected opportunities. At work, he was offered a promotion, one that required him to travel frequently and meet new people. He embraced it wholeheartedly, seeing it as a chance to rebuild his life on his own terms. On one of these trips, Michael found himself at a quaint coffee shop in a bustling city. He had always loved the hum of conversation and the aroma of fresh coffee, but today felt different. As he sipped his drink, lost in thought, a voice broke through his reverie. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" He looked up to see a woman with a warm smile and kind eyes. She appeared confident but unassuming, dressed casually yet elegantly. Michael gestured for her to sit, and what started as a polite exchange turned into an hour-long conversation filled with laughter and shared stories. Her name was Claire, and she was unlike anyone Michael had met before. She was straightforward and honest, with a quiet strength that mirrored his own. They exchanged numbers before parting ways, and for the first time in a long time, Michael felt a spark of hope. Meanwhile, Lisa's life remained in freefall. She had tried reaching out to old friends, but the humiliation from the dinner party had left her ostracized. Even her family had grown distant, unwilling to condone her actions. She spent her evenings alone in her apartment, scrolling through social media and seeing glimpses of the life she had thrown away. Michael's updates were few and far between, but they painted a picture of someone thriving, a stark contrast to her own existence. Months passed, and Michael and Claire's relationship blossomed. They bonded over shared values and a mutual appreciation for honesty. Michael was upfront about his past, sharing the pain he had endured and the lessons he had learned. Claire listened without judgment, her compassion shining through. One evening, as they walked along the beach, Claire asked, "Do you ever think about her? Lisa, I mean?" Michael paused, looking out at the waves. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but not in the way I used to. It's not anger or pain anymore. It's just a reminder of how far I've come." Claire nodded, slipping her hand into his. "You've come a long way, Michael, and I'm glad I get to be part of this chapter." Michael smiled, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. "So am I." Back in her apartment, Lisa stared at an old photo of her and Michael, taken during a happier time. She wondered if she'd ever feel that kind of joy again, or if her choices had condemned her to a life of regret. She thought about reaching out to him one last time, but knew it wouldn't change anything. Michael had moved on, and she was left to face the consequences of her actions alone. As Michael's life continued to flourish, his relationship with Claire deepened. They had developed a bond built on mutual trust and understanding. something Michael had once believed was impossible after what he had endured. One day, as they explored a local art festival together, Claire stopped to admire a painting of a phoenix rising from the ashes. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice thoughtful. "It reminds me of you." Michael raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Me?" She smiled. "Yes. You've been through the fire, but look at you now. You didn't just survive. You rose above it." Her words stayed with Michael long after they left the festival. For the first time, he realized that he had indeed emerged stronger, not just in the eyes of others, but in his own. Meanwhile, Lisa's regret grew heavier with each passing day. She had spent months trying to rebuild her life, but nothing seemed to click. Her job was mundane, her social life non-existent, and every attempt to move forward felt like dragging a weight behind her. One evening, she received an invitation to a mutual friend's wedding, one of the few connections she still had left. Despite her hesitation, she decided to go, hoping it might be a chance to reconnect with old acquaintances and, perhaps, Michael. The wedding was beautiful, set in a sprawling vineyard under a golden sunset. As Lisa entered the reception area, she scanned the crowd nervously, her heart skipping a beat when she spotted Michael. He was standing near the bar, laughing with a small group of people. Lisa noticed how different he looked, more confident, more at ease. And then her heart sank as she saw Claire by his side, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Lisa's initial instinct was to approach him, to apologize face to face and maybe find some semblance of closure. But as she watched him interact with Claire, she realized that Michael had truly moved on. Approaching him now would only reopen old wounds, and she wasn't sure she could handle the rejection. Michael noticed Lisa from across the room but didn't react. He felt no anger, no sadness, only a quiet indifference. Claire leaned in and whispered, "Do you want to leave?" Michael shook his head. I'm exactly where I need to be." Lisa spent the rest of the evening in the background, watching as Michael and Claire danced, laughed, and shared moments that were once hers. By the end of the night, she slipped out unnoticed, tears streaming down her face as she drove away. Michael, however, didn't give her another thought. The wedding had served as a reminder of how far he had come and how much he had gained. Lisa's presence was nothing more than a fleeting shadow in the bright light of his new life. As time moved on, Michael continued to thrive. His relationship with Claire grew stronger, and together they built a life filled with trust, joy, and shared dreams. Michael's once turbulent emotions about his past were now nothing more than faint ripples on the surface of his calm, steady life. One day, while organizing his home office, Michael stumbled upon an old box of memories from his marriage to Lisa. Inside were photos, anniversary cards, and keepsakes from their life together. He picked up a framed photo of the two of them on their wedding day, their smiles radiant and full of promise. For a moment, Michael felt a pang of sadness. Not for Lisa, but for the man he had been back then. The man who had believed in a future that wasn't meant to be. Without hesitation, Michael took the box to his backyard fire pit. One by one, he placed the items into the flames, watching as they curled and blackened, the smoke rising into the cool evening air. It wasn't an act of anger, but one of closure. When the last item had burned, Michael stood in the fading light, feeling lighter than he had in years. The past no longer had a hold on him. He had let it go, piece by piece, and in its place was a future he was ready to embrace. Lisa, however, was trapped in a cycle of regret and what-ifs. She spent her nights replaying the decisions that had led her to this point, wondering if there had been a moment when she could have stopped herself. Her isolation was complete, estranged from friends, disconnected from her family, and haunted by the life she had lost. She scrolled through social media, seeing glimpses of Michael's new life with Claire. Each post felt like a knife to the heart, a reminder of everything she had thrown away. One evening, Lisa decided to write Michael a letter. It was raw, filled with apologies and admissions of guilt. She poured out her regret, hoping that, even if he didn't respond, it would bring her some measure of peace. Michael received the letter a week later. He read it carefully, noting the pain and sincerity in her words. But as he finished, he realized something profound. He didn't need her apology. He had already forgiven her, not for her sake, but for his own. He folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, choosing not to respond. Lisa's journey was hers to take, just as his was his own. That evening, as Michael sat with Claire on their porch, watching the stars, he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He had walked through fire and come out stronger, and now he was exactly where he was meant to be. Months later, Michael stood at the edge of a cliffside trail, the wind whipping through his hair as he gazed out at the expansive view of the ocean. It was a place he had discovered with Claire during one of their many weekend hikes, a spot that had become a symbol of their new beginnings. Claire stood beside him, her hand intertwined with his, her warmth grounding him in the present. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said softly, leaning her head on his shoulder. Michael nodded, a content smile on his face. "It is. And so is this. Everything we've built together." For the first time in years, Michael felt whole. He had risen above the betrayal and heartbreak, carving out a life that was richer and more fulfilling than he could have imagined. Claire had been his anchor, but the strength to move forward had come from within. Back in town, Lisa's life remained a stark contrast. She worked long hours at a job she hated, her apartment a lonely reminder of what she had lost. She often thought about Michael, wondering if he ever thought of her. But Michael didn't. One evening, Michael received a message from a mutual acquaintance, an old friend who had kept tabs on both him and Lisa. "She's not doing well," the friend had written. "She's struggling to keep it together." Michael read the message but felt no urge to respond. It wasn't his responsibility to save her, not anymore. She had made her choices, and he had made his. His focus was on the future, not the past. That weekend, Michael and Claire hosted a small gathering at their home, inviting friends and family to celebrate their engagement. As Michael looked around the room, filled with laughter and love, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace. He raised his glass to make a toast. "To new beginnings," he said, his voice steady and full of conviction, "and to the people who remind us that the best is always yet to come." Michael's journey had been one of pain and betrayal, but it had also been one of growth and redemption. He had taken control of his narrative, turning a nightmare into a testament of resilience and strength. Lisa remained a chapter in his story, but only that, a chapter. The rest of the book was his to write, and he was determined to fill it with love, purpose, and joy. As he clinked glasses with Claire, the sunset casting a golden glow over the room, Michael knew one thing for certain: his best days were still ahead.